Welcome to How to Trust Your Intuition, the podcast, the place where we learn that trust is earned and not given, even with ourselves. I'm your host, Betsy LaFay. I'm a social worker, turned award-winning psychic medium, turned intuition teacher. And my school, Trust Yourself Intuition School, celebrated its 10th anniversary in 2023. Join us each episode as we interview thought leaders and luminaries in every genre. They talk about how and when they learn to trust their intuition. Most say they're still learning. What happens when they do trust it, and what happens when they don't. Stick around as we all walk together down the road towards trusting our intuition. Welcome back, y'all, to another episode of How to Trust Your Intuition. As we mentioned last week, we are on a little bit of a break for this week and next. We'll be back with fresh new episodes on June 19th. Very exciting. Today, we're bringing back a crowd favorite, my interview with Ruby Warrington. Ruby and I have a long history of friendship. I fondly recall us sitting in a coffee shop on Graham Avenue in Brooklyn, New York, in Williamsburg, before the Numinous was born. And that was our first conversation together. Since then, she's done fantastic things. She's started the Sober Curious movement, featured me in her first book, Material Girl Meets Mystical World, which I believe now is 10 and a half years ago. Phew. She has a new book out, Women Without Kids, and a podcast that goes along with it. I have to be honest, I have not gotten to the book yet. I have listened to every episode of the podcast, and I could speak mountains about it. The thing that I feel most compelled to share, over the past few years of her doing this research, she has done a deep dive and so much emotional labor for us all. If you know of any women at all with or without children, this is something that will change your life. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to Ruby's new book, Women Without Kids, and also a link to the podcast. Please give both a listen. They are worth it. She's my sister. Enjoy this replay of my interview with Ruby Warrington. Check it out, y'all. This week, I'm so psyched to bring to you my interview with Ruby Warrington. I am blessed to be able to call her a dear friend, and I can still clearly recall when we were sitting in a coffee shop in Williamsburg and the numinous was just a glimmer in her eye. Ruby Warrington is the creator of the term Sober Curious, author of the 2018 book of the same title. Her work has spearheaded the global movement to reevaluate our relationship to alcohol. Other works of hers are Material Girl, Mystical World, which, of course, one of my seances is featured in. That is also memorable, which we mentioned in the interview. She has the Numinous Astro Deck and the Sober Curious Reset. With 20 plus years experience as a lifestyle journalist and editor, she's also the founder of the self-publishing imprint Numinous Books. So she is totally known as a thought leader of the now age in the wellness space. I'm so excited to bring to you Ruby. It is raw, and we do some vulnerable shares. I hope you enjoy it. You're all ready for your vacation. It's really hectic getting here, but you're seated in your airplane seat, looking out the window, and you hear the pilot come on the intercom. Good day, everyone. It's a beautiful day outside, 71 and sunny. As you're aware, to get to where we're going, we need to fly over that mountain range, and sometimes there can be a little bit of turbulence. I'm about 80% sure we'll get there safely. So buckle up, relax, and enjoy your flight. I know that sounds like an absurd situation, but when I put this in context of trusting yourself and trusting your intuition, and I ask people on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most, how much do you trust yourself? 8 is a very high score when asking people. So if you fall on a 2 to 4 range, you're totally not alone.
Now picture this other scenario. You're out to lunch with a friend, and the friend says that they've been having a really difficult time learning French. You ask the logical question, are you taking a class? And their answer is, well, I'm taking Spanish. Guess what? If you want to trust yourself deeply, if you want to have an easier time making decisions, break through blocks, connect with people, know who to connect with when, there's a class for that. I've actually helped thousands of people truly trust themselves in uncertainty, in times of doubt or fear, shame or guilt. And I have a free masterclass called Intuition 101, How to Trust Yourself in Uncertain Times, that will tell you everything you need to know in order to learn to trust yourself. The link is in the show notes. However, you can also go to howtotrustyourintuition.com, all spelled out.
Welcome, Ruby Warrington, to the show.
Thanks, Betsy. It's good to be here.
Well, I just love connecting with you in general. It's an honor to be your friend. And I know I can share with the public that you are as kind and warm as you are in public as you are in person.
Aww.
So, yeah. And today we're going to be talking about intuition. I also know that you talked a little bit about intuition in your first book, Material Girl and Mystical World. So, you know, on these interviews, we talk about, we answer 3 questions and then we talk about other things. But the first question I always ask is, when and how did you learn how to trust your intuition?
Oof. The thing that I'm just going to go with the thing that immediately came to my mind, because I hadn't really considered my answer to that question. Or I guess when I first considered my answer to that question, it was sort of like, well, I've always just trusted it. But there have definitely been times when I haven't. And the big time when I didn't trust it. And I know we'll get to that, but it
Sure, you can talk about that
why I realized the importance of like trusting it was in my first relationship. I mean, we've both been there. Yes. 6 years in an emotionally abusive, coercive relationship with somebody who I knew from the minute I stepped into airspace with him was dangerous, was manipulative, was violent, was not a good person for me. And I spent 6 years in a relationship with him after that point.
Right.
And my intuition told me to leave every day of that relationship. And it took 6 years, largely because I was also smoking extremely strong weed every day. I had an eating disorder at the time. I was in a very depressed and low space in my life.
Yeah.
And finally listening to what my body and my brain had been telling me for 6 years, getting the courage to leave him, which was huge for me, was literally like getting my life back. I mean, it was really just the positive affirmation that I then got in my life in terms of the doors opening, the people I met, the opportunities that started coming my way, just how I felt in my body and myself immediately afterwards was just like, yes, such a huge yes. So that was, I mean, that experience was a life-defining experience for me. In some ways, I kind of feel like having that happen in my life when I was so young, I was 16 when I met him, was such, I remember coming out of that relationship and just saying to myself almost every day and on repeat, that's never going to happen to me again. I'm never going to not trust myself again. I'm never going to allow myself to be manipulated. I'm never going to allow myself to be imprisoned in that way again.
Right.
And how do I do that? By being completely honest with myself and the people in my life, and actually really like fearlessly doing what I know is right for me. No apologies.
Yeah.
You know, it was such a clear indicator of what can happen when you don't listen. Like such a physical, real, like lived experience of like the worst that can happen when you don't listen.
Yeah.
But I knew I could never allow that to happen again.
In some ways, I guess that would be a gift too, right?
Oh, I see it that way now. I see it that way now. And the reason I mentioned my age, I feel like having that experience so young set me up in a way, in such a strong way, to not allow that to happen to myself again, and to always trust myself, and to always prioritize my needs ultimately.
Right.
You know, and
Right.
learning that, I'm so grateful that it happened to me at that age.
Right.
You know,
I have some specific questions about that, because like, you're right. I was also in a 6-year coercive, abusive, manipulative, gaslighting relationship that was dangerous. In my case, I heard clear sentences before I even met him: he is not for you. But I ignored my intuition. My intuition, I mean, it probably was telling me things, but I ignored it on that front. I want to know 2 things about that. I want to know, I mean, it's very complex with heavy cannabis use and an eating disorder and depression and being 16. But what do you suppose? I mean, because as you said, your intuition was telling you every day. So what do you suppose kept you, or made you say yes initially to that relationship and kept you in it when your intuition was saying no?
he showed me so much attention. He was obsessed with me, and I hadn't ever really had that. You know, I was kind of not ignored in my family, but I never really got the attention that I needed, basically.
Same.
My brother was kind of like the star player.
Yeah.
He had a very severe illness when he was very young, and so all attention on him.
Yeah.
My dad had left, had another relationship. I just was kind of like the outsider one in my family. And I think someone older than me, of course, this guy was older than me. He was 22 when I met him. I was kind of like, he wants me. Mm-hmm. And that was so seductive. And so it wasn't even that was seductive, because at the same time I felt physical feelings of repulsion towards him. Yeah. But it was so what my psyche, my attachment system needed so badly, to feel like I was like wanted.
Yep.
To feel like I was desired.
Yep.
That kind of overrode my my intuition in that instance.
Well, now you're speaking my language. I tell people all the time that I'm the world's leading expert on attachment and intuition. I think you're second in the running, because you published a book on intuition, and now you're working with someone on a book on attachment. So honestly, I think you might
I know about these subjects too. Yeah.
And that I completely understand and agree with. And I think that's just worth saying a little bit about, because I didn't even really know what love bombing was until I got loved bombed by a coach, which was the last, sort of significant relationship, a new one that I had, as of 2021. And love bombing works. So for those of you who don't know what love bombing is, it's someone giving you their full loving attention. Think of like a waterfall of love and attention and appreciation, and that laser point focus, and the whole world disappears when you're with this person. And the only way that love bombing can work, is with someone who's unempowered, someone who has attachment issues, and it's just so interesting. That was I was emotionally ignored as a kid. And so when the husband came into my life, that's what I call my ex-husband, for those of you who don't know, he had this typical Scorpio quality about him, where he didn't do this just to me. And I do think it's somewhat of a positive quality, when he's with you or me or anyone, he's looking you right in the eyes, and it's just like laser point focus on you, which even today, like, I require a lot of attention. And I was just like, whoa, this person really cares about me. I'm their number one. They love me. Like, that definitely sucked me in as well. And it also makes you easily manipulated and controlled and all that stuff you talked about. My second question is, how did you wake up from that? How did you get out of that?
I almost wasn't going to go to university. He was discouraging it. I had found a job. It meant I could move out of my parents' home and move in with him. And so I was kind of like, wasn't planning on going to university. And then I decided that a lifetime of working in a store wasn't really what I wanted. And so I decided I did manage to get to university. And at college, I met a friend actually who was, I credit her with really helping me get out of that relationship. She was the only person in my life who really kind of noticed that there was a problem, and not only noticed that there was a problem, actually spoke to me about it and actually encouraged me to do something about it. And looking back, I'm just like, that's wild that not a friend, not a family member ever said, are you sure this is the right relationship for you? And I say that sounds a bit embittered, but I think probably, and I fully take responsibility for the fact that I wouldn't hear that.
Right.
But I wouldn't hear that from anybody, and that actually anybody who did suggest that would be blocked out of my life because I wasn't ready to hear it. But no, my friend at the time, she didn't so much as kind of say, you have to leave him. Mm-hmm. She more kind of helped me to see that there was a world for me outside of that relationship. And she invited me very proactively and warmly into that world. Wow. And I mean, the ultimate kind of what happened, and in a way, it's like, it wasn't that necessarily healthy because I started drinking alcohol. I replaced weed for alcohol. And this was a much more confidence boosting substance. This was a much more action inspiring substance than weed, which I now cannot go anywhere near because it makes me so paralyzed and so paranoid and so insular. Alcohol gave me the false confidence, which in that instance I needed to be able to just be like, fuck it, I'm leaving. And so I moved out of his house and I moved in with, she gave me a kind of halfway house, like in her spare room. She let me stay with her for a bit while I just kind of got on my feet. But I'm just forever grateful for that friendship, basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. In my case, he had everyone fooled. In fact, my mom said the other day, she's like, well, I thought he was Prince Charming and I didn't realize. She was like, I didn't realize he was Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. And in my case, he had everyone fooled. And even when I told people some really horrific things, some of them literally just ignored it and stayed mute. And they were my confidants, my people that like I really relied on. And I was like, it was one of those things where like you're looking around and you're like, this can't be healthy, this can't be normal, let me tell someone. And they'd be like, yeah, you shouldn't eat 5 cheeseburgers a day, that's not good, which wasn't happening. But he told me that he didn't want to be married to me unless we were in business together. And so I told my friend that, and it literally got ignored. And I was like, okay, there must be something wrong with me then.
If that seems odd.
Yeah. I mean, now looking back, I'm like, I'm not even friends with that person anymore for relatively obvious reasons. I think that all of those things, I mean, we've even talked on your podcasts in the past about cannabis use. I think for me personally, it's just extraordinarily complex. I've had it dull me and numb me, and I've also had it wake me up at certain points. And currently I'm a no to it, but sometimes I'm a yes. But I do know that anything used in extremes, anything used habitually, even different strains do different things. Sometimes I want to, but then it makes me paranoid, so I don't.
I mean, it was used by him as a way to control me. We met in Amsterdam in a weed shop. I mean, that was his whole thing. Like his whole world was that basically. And so I remember when I expressed to him that the strain of weed that he smoked was too strong for me. And I literally passed out from it several times. He was like, that's okay, I'll get you some lighter Thai weed. You can smoke that. Yeah. And would literally roll me joints and hand them to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is being held captive for sure. Wow. It was
so intense.
Glad. And I just want to say too, for anyone out there who maybe has had an extreme relationship scenario, don't judge or feel shameful if you've gone back into that cycle. For me, I'm in therapy now, and I told my therapist about some relationship a long time ago. She didn't, she's new to me, so she doesn't know my whole history. And she's like, oh, you've attracted these people for quite a long time. And I'm like, yeah, but
what happens is I keep growing, right? And I keep getting better and clearer and healthier myself. So therefore, healthier partners come into play, right? If you're dealing with toxicity, if you're dealing with attachment, if you're dealing with former abuse or trauma, like it's not going to be, it may not be as simple, and not that your situation was simple, but in a podcast, we say it simply. As like, that was so bad, I'll never let that happen again, because a lot of times people, and for
Here's
me,
the thing. So I met my now husband, who I've been with for 23 years, like 6 months after I broke up with him. And I was very wary about getting into a new relationship, because the last thing I wanted was to go there again. And yet here was someone I met who my attachment system attuned with in such what felt like a healthy and reciprocal way, that I was just completely drawn to being with this person. However, I mean, in some ways, he and I have quite a codependent relationship. Like we've kind of been joined at the hip for 23 years. So some people might even just say, well, I just kind of switched out that relationship for this one. But I mean, my relationship with my husband now is nothing like that.
I would say
there hasn't been that element of, it is. There's definitely some kind of codependent elements. However, it's very healthy, and it's very, we're very supportive of each other, and there've been no issues around control.
Right. Well, knowing you and being in touch with you over the years, I have seen you go through stress, he go through stress. Look, you living in New York City in a rather small apartment, and now you're under a pandemic. Like, that's co-regulation. That is not codependence.
Yeah. It's true. And we've definitely had times when we've kind of come closer and let each other have space. And I took 6 months out of my current relationship and went and lived in a different country, actually, which was an interesting experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Again, that was another time when I followed my intuition. Yeah. I knew that my career at the time wasn't going in the direction I wanted. In fact, it was taking me into a very anxiety-ridden and challenging place. I was working at a place again where I was being bullied. There was a lot of sexism. It was a very racist environment. I witnessed a lot of racism that was very uncomfortable, and it was just horrendous. And so I just left with no safety net, no job, and decided I'm going to go live in Ibiza for a summer, just see what happens. And again, it was this full body, yes, do this, but it made zero logical sense, because it would also mean leaving my husband, who we were having a bit of a rocky patch at the time. But I just went for it. And there were challenges, sure, but it also opened a whole new kind of like avenue in terms of my career, my self-confidence, like just so much opened up for me again in that experience. This is for me a sign when I know I've followed my intuition, because things just start to open, like more, there's an expansive feeling. There's like more stuff starts to come in. And I think if I get to a place where it feels like my options are closing off and things are getting smaller and more limited, then I know I haven't been listening to my intuition, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. And we were just talking before we started recording about all of our previous business ventures and how we put our heart and soul into them, and even built up large things that just were not providing for us the things that we needed. You know, we can elbow grease our way through anything. You know, the minute that I said yes to doing mediumship, which is just like 2 weeks ago, fresh, all these people started booking more readings, Instagram following went up, you know, like all of these things just started happening, and I didn't even touch those things. You know, so I totally get that. And I do just want to make that, since we're talking about that, just from an example of my own life, you know, like continually changing and trying different things to get the doors to open up. But meanwhile, there's like an elephant in the room, you know, and it's like not we all, but most of us have heard, you know, if you want the outside to change, you have to change the inside. You have to change what you're doing to see a change, right? So I just kept changing and denying my gifts to the world, right? And you had mentioned a similar thing. You're like, all right, editing. And as soon as you said yes to editing, avalanche comes in.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I thought that you were going to say, Betsy, I learned to trust my intuition in your seance that I wrote about, Material Girl, Mystical World. But what I will say about that time, because I almost remember it like it's yesterday, even though it was so long ago. You really just ran with it. I just did a tiny intro like I always did. So I ran seances in my house for 3 years, in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and Ruby came with her man. And in every single one of those seances, I did a mini intuition 101. And I was just like, if you get a random thing in your consciousness, it is intuition and you get to interpret it. And you your energy was just like, oh, that's it. Okay. And it was a reading to someone that you'd never met before. And they were like, yeah, that's totally accurate.
I know. Yeah, I guess I discovered language for something that's just always come really naturally, or felt like it had always come really naturally. I've been thinking about it recently, not even like in the lead up to this podcast, but I was thinking about, I think I was I'm doing an editing job. I have hired another editor to work on a project, and I was talking through, she asked me to have a look at it and kind of give my feedback as well. And then we were on a call with the client, and I was trying to explain why I was giving certain feedback. And I realized I couldn't explain it in words, because I realized that my editing process and my writing process is entirely embodied intuitive.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't explain to you why this has to go here. It just does.
Yeah.
It's just, and I realized the extent to which I use my intuition like every day in my writing work and my editing work as well. There's nothing, I don't do processes. I just don't do, and I know I have like driven so many like social media people up the wall. They always want me to come up with a schedule and come up with a plan, and like, we're going to do this and this and this, and let's have this. And then I'm just like, great, sounds great. And we'll start off like that. And then it will just go completely off in a different direction. Cause I'm like, let's do this today. We need to do this. And like,
yep.
Because it's my work life, which is my creative life, is like entirely intuitively led. It's not, there's no language to explain or describe how I work the way that I do. And I think your seance kind of gave a bit of language of that process that I just kind of like operate by anyway.
Yeah. And you gave that formula. It's like, I don't know why, but this just needs to happen. That's the language of intuition.
Right. Yeah.
You know, another way of saying it is, here's all the facts as to why it shouldn't work, but I just feel
it will.
or another way to put it's the same thing. I have this strong feeling that things should go this way, but fact, it shouldn't happen, right? So like, that's the thing. Like, you can't, you know, and that's what I always tell people about intuition too, which is so beautiful. I was just saying this to my team. Intuition becomes super logical in the way that it means extra logical, but also as in supernatural, super logical, because when you're in tune with your feelings, when you're in tune with your intuition, it just is. It's like, it's either the shoe fits or it doesn't. You don't need to explain like, well, my pinky toe is kind of squishing over to the right a little bit. And so when you are in tune with your intuition, when you're following your intuition, when your loved ones know that you follow your intuition, you could be planning a vacation with your man, you know, to Mykonos, which you've been dreaming of forever.
I wish. I will just put it out there. I wish. Oh my God.
And you could have everything set. And then all of a sudden your intuition could be like, I have no logical reason as to why, but this is not going to happen. And if you're in a certain type of relationship and you trust yourself and they trust you, they're just going to say, okay. You don't need to explain it. If you don't feel it, we know that means, you know, and even in my dysfunctional relationship, that was the case. It was when I said I didn't feel it, we didn't do it. Because there wasn't any arguing at a certain point.
Even in my super functional relationship, That's not the case. If I say it's not happening, they'll often be like, what do you mean it's not happening? Yes, it is. And then I'll just have to like stand my ground.
Well, yeah, I think that, eventually, I mean, I do think that conflict and, even like fighting, like having high emotions and everything, it can forge a stronger relationship. And after a certain amount of time, and it's different for everyone, of you or whoever's listening, standing up and saying, no, I will not eat this tonight. No, I will not go there tomorrow. No, I will not pay for this today. Then eventually they do know you mean business, right? Because that's the thing, that stuff happens internally first, right? Is that we have the argument. I love Mykonos. It's been a pandemic and now I'm finally free. Now I can go. Like, I deserve it. I have the money. Like, my friend gave us the free place to stay, and then it's like, but my God, it's all twisted in knots when I think about it.
Yeah, right.
So we have all that internally first. That's amazing. So tell us about a time when you did trust your intuition and what happened.
When I graduated with a BA in psychology in 2002, attachment work was only applied to children. Now, in 2023, it seems to be all the rage for a reason, because knowing your attachment type, there are 3 main types: avoidant, anxious, and secure, really changes your life. And if you listen to the podcast where I talked about how I lost $100,000 from a spiritual, quote unquote, spiritual coach, the silver lining to that experience was me discovering the root of a lot of my issues. I was anxiously attached. I had anxious attachment. At the very end of that terrible, terrible situation, yes, it was traumatic, I came across Maya Diamond's work. And it was working through her program that literally rewired my brain from anxious to secure. This is how I made it through all of my major transitions over the past 2 years and discovered so much about myself. Now, if you don't know about attachment work, don't feel bad. Here's a typical situation, in fact, the most common situation that happens with these attachment styles. Person A and person B are in a relationship. They care about one another. Person A reaches out to person B, doesn't hear back right away. So then maybe sends another text or another gesture, which further pushes person B away. Both people get resentful, and eventually they might break up. I was in that situation more often than I'd like to remember. I married the wrong person, I had toxic family relationships, and had no idea until I took Maya's program. So, the link for a free consultation is in the show notes, and I'm so happy to offer it all the podcast listeners. If you sign up for her program, you will get a free session worth $500 with Maya Diamond herself, one-on-one. That's just for How to Trust Your Intuition podcast listeners.
Well, there's a time that we spoke about,
Yeah.
that I'd mentioned when we initially spoke about this podcast. So I mentioned I met my current husband 6 months after finishing that or leaving that relationship. And within 3 months of meeting him, I was pregnant.
Wow.
And I had an IUD in at the time. So
You had
I had an
IUD.
IUD.
Wow.
I also had not had regular periods or many periods at all throughout that previous 6 years because of my eating disorder. And so I was very surprised to find myself pregnant.
Yeah.
And not ready to be pregnant. And I knew instantly that I would have an abortion. And I know this is a hugely conflicted choice for people.
Yeah.
Hugely.
Yeah.
There's so much, regardless of like the personal choice around how this will impact your life and whether you're ready to be a parent and whether you want to be a parent and whether you could have an abortion.
Right.
That personal choice is huge time of moral reckoning for people. And then there's the external stigma and expectation and all of the stuff. But there was no question in my mind that I would have an abortion. And so I did. And I've always been so grateful that it wasn't, that I was able to just very quickly trust my own intuition and my own guidance around that, because I have never once regretted the choice. In fact, I have only ever thanked myself for making that choice, because I don't know anything, right, in terms of how things could or would have gone.
Right.
I suspect that my life would have gone in a very different direction. My relationship may have gone in a very different direction, my career, just my sense of self. And so I'm very grateful that I was able to just kind of really follow that then. And also that I lived in a country where it was not so stigmatized as it is here in the US, where abortion access is very readily available. It's completely free on the National Health Service. So I'm very grateful as well for all of those practical reasons. And the reason it had come up as a time, when you asked me about that, is because I just helped I just edited and helped an author write a book about her abortion. And it was only kind of really going through that process with her that I realized how conflicted of a decision this is for the majority of people. Yeah. And it really shone a light on how clear it was for me, and helped me to feel, again, just so grateful for that, Yeah.
I didn't realize that the views were so different in the UK on abortion. I think that's amazing. I think that's really amazing.
I mean, there's definitely, I actually used to live up the road from an abortion clinic, or like a kind of the UK version of Planned Parenthood, I suppose. And occasionally there would be protesters outside, but occasionally, and not nearly so aggressive and not nearly so loud and abusive on the pro-life side. Yeah, exactly.
Making it illegal and threatening.
And access always freely and readily available. And like I said, for free.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Really
that is phenomenal. What were you afraid to bring it to your partner and say that? Were you afraid to tell anyone? Did you not tell anyone? Like, what happened?
No, I don't remember like broadcasting it among my friends. I don't remember. I must have spoken to my mom about it. I don't really remember speaking to my dad about it. It was a big thing, like in this new relationship of being with someone for 3 months. It was a big thing to come up. But if anything, I think it was an indicator of how well he and I communicate. Because he was just very available to listen to what I needed. I mean, he was 25 and had never considered being a parent. And actually discovered then that he has had very similar views as me, which was that neither of us have ever really wanted to be parents. And it's never been something that we felt conflicted about.
Right.
And so it was in a way we discovered early on in the relationship, we got to have that really important conversation about like, what are our thoughts about family? And we realized early on, we're aligned on this actually. Yeah. And so that was a good thing for our relationship.
Right. Phenomenal. That's really amazing. I think there was something else I wanted to ask about that. Well, it's just as an American and not growing up where it was free and down the street and easily accessible, and not having white men decide what any woman was doing with their body. It just seems like such a cultural difference, because it's like, so I know what I wanted to address here. One of the biggest mistakes someone can make, I talk about this in my webinar, how to trust your intuition without second guessing in the face of fear, doubt, and uncertainty. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is they basically misread the signs, right? The signs of intuition, the signs of the universe, like whatever it is. And I can fully see how someone would see a miraculous conception, not as in the miraculous conception, but conception being miraculous in itself, especially with an IUD, right? Being like, this must be a sign from the universe. And even that, like, take away society, take away partner, take away family, take away religion, take away government, even that being an inner conflict of like, this happened, so therefore it must be a sign of the universe. And so I think that is even more impressive that you didn't take that bait. And I do mean it by taking the bait, because we're co-creators, right? And we get to decide, and we do get to decide. Our actions do dictate the future. And we don't have decision over everything, but that is a decision that we get to make. And it's a huge decision that affects so much, as you were just, people won't be able to hear this, but as you were just moving your cat off the desk.
I know. It's about his feeding time.
I think it's important to bring this in, but let me just say that, like, it's similar, because I watch, you asked me when we had our private conversation last about how I use Instagram. And I said, Instagram algorithm knows me so well. It just shows me interspecies friendship videos and like cat and dog rescues, which I love. I love like the deer becoming friends with the dog out of nowhere. And there's videos of people who aren't cat people finding cats and rescuing them, finding out that they are cat people. Like, they're about ready to get rid of the cat, and they're like, oh, but I had to keep the cat. And, I'm sure there are other videos or other situations out there of people rescuing cats, not being cat people, and being like, I really am not a cat person. I'm going to give this cat to someone who's a cat person, right? And so although it's not the same as conceiving a human baby in your womb, it still is the universe giving you baby life, basically, kind of randomly. Obviously there was actions before that, but just because a kitten showed up on your front door doesn't mean that you have to become a cat mom.
Well, I have very deep thoughts about this. I definitely thought that. My initial reaction when I got the positive test was like, this is meant to be. This is obviously meant to be.
Right.
But what I thought was meant to be was this relationship. I was like, this is a sign I'm supposed to be with this person.
Right.
It's obviously like mad compatibility here.
Yeah.
Like, this is somebody who, like, my body is responding extremely positively to this person.
Yeah.
So that was what I took it as a sign for.
That's
amazing. And I did and I didn't feel conflicted about it at all. I didn't feel any grief or sadness afterwards. I just felt relief that I was able to make the decision that I did, that it wasn't questioned and that it wasn't challenging. And then I did a family constellations therapy session, probably around the same time we first met and I was first creating the Numinous. And just kind of experimenting, investigating different healing modalities and things. And she asked me as we entered the session, have you ever had a termination? Is there ever another child? And I said yes. And she brought the spirit of the child into the session and explained, and it was incredibly, I didn't know that I needed to hear this, but she explained to me that within family systems or family constellations therapy, every child has its karma, plays its role in the family lineage. And that child doesn't have to be born. So this goes for children of miscarriage also.
Right. Or stillborn.
That soul has had its karma, done its thing, right? And so it was really cool to think about, not cool. It was really, it felt like a completion point to hear that. And it helped me to sort of, for myself anyway, make sense of, this did happen for a reason. Yeah. And I sense, my new book is going to be on the subject of women not having children for whatever reason, by circumstance, by choice, by design, for whatever reason, women are having fewer and fewer children. And I'm just really interested in why that is. And I do believe that me not having a child has ended some patterns and some cycles of emotional abuse in my family, which is very potent. And I think that me not having that child was symbolic of that, something ending in my lineage, actually.
That is deep.
Yeah.
That's really deep. So I can imagine someone listening and you explained, and it does make logical sense somewhat.
Super logical.
Yes, exactly. I saw it as a symbol that this relationship was compatible, that this was a good relationship. And I just want to explain to people with intuition that it's a completely insular process, that that's one of the things with, for instance, to take it into a lighter place, to explain synchronicities, right? Synchronicities can't be explained effectively. You tell someone a synchronicity, and it's the same thing of them saying, like, I guess you had to be there, because it just doesn't make sense. And it's the same thing with intuition, like you and I could have the same random thought about blueberries, but it could mean something different to you than it could mean to me. You could be thinking of the blueberry farm that you grew up on. I could be thinking about the abortion that I had when the fetus was the size of a blueberry, and so I want people to understand that and know that you were using your intuition. You were making it logical because we can talk about it, but it goes back to that same thing we were talking about with writing. It's like, this goes here. I can't explain why, it just does. It just goes there. Yeah. This is a sign that this relationship is meant to move forward, but I'm not meant to be a mother.
Yeah.
That's incredible, and I think that's the real value of this broadcast, is letting people know that it's so individualized, and it's not logical in the way of like, oh, right, like you're having an abortion, you're taking that as a sign, as that relationship is meant to stick. Like, that doesn't make sense to an outsider. But if you feel that inside, that is what your intuition is saying. It is oftentimes counter logical. Wow, that is phenomenal. I'm going to announce something. It sounds like a big risk to me. So I announced it on social media. I was only in stories, so people didn't really see it. And I think you might have been the only person that I told. But a couple of weeks ago, I was getting out of the shower, and I was just, I'm 41 now and single. And I did not freeze my eggs. And I don't have a regular menstrual cycle, and never have. And I was like, well, I was tuning into my intuition, and I was like, what would happen if I did want to have kids? What would happen if I didn't have kids? All of that. There's your fur baby. Mm-hmm. So I decided, well, I'll go with not having kids, although I do have a desire to, right? I was like, you know what? I don't know what the story is with my eggs. I'm 41. I'm single. There's so many other things they can birth into the world. Let me give up on that dream. And you heard the story. As soon as I walked out of the bathroom, I looked out the window, and there was a parade of 12 turkeys moving through the yard. At the time, I took it as, oh, this is the universe saying, like, you're very fertile, and, you will have abundance with all this stuff. I don't actually think that's what it was saying, because I had said, I'm going to let go of having this dream of having kids. And then all of this positive stuff came through. So
the turkeys were representing all of the other things that you can birth into the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I actually do feel that way. So yeah. I don't actually like to solidify these things. Something could change in the future. Getting with a partner, we would have a talk about kids, and I would say there's a million things that I want to do before I have kids, and I'm 41 now, or however old I'll be. So, we'll see. But, as time's been going on, I've just, the people who don't have kids, the people who do have kids, like the conversations that are coming up, the things that I know that I can afford myself, not even just money, but like energy wise. I wouldn't be able to take care of my parents in the way that I am now if I had children. Mm-hmm. All that stuff. So I know
this is an area definitely like where intuition is very hard to follow your intuition, because there are so many, what I've heard described as feeling rules around motherhood and around parenting. It's very much what we're supposed to want on a biological, like, evolutionary level. And so to hear a message that goes counter to that is true to you is extremely difficult. And so I hope, not that I'm writing this book to encourage people not to have children, but I do want to just open up the possibility that this is not necessarily women's like ultimate natural role. That's the kind of message that we receive to our detriment sometimes, I think,
Yep. And I know you're going to touch on women who do have children who don't feel like they're the
Yes.
ultimate mother.
Yes.
Women who have children who feel like they don't like being a mother.
Mm-hmm.
Women who have children who don't like their children.
Mm-hmm.
That's all
It's
really
so taboo.
important.
Everything
Yeah.
you just said, people might even be listening to this thinking,
Yeah.
we can't talk about that. We need to talk about, I kind of like, and this is again, so it's another area where I follow my intuition.
Yeah.
I am very drawn to talk about taboo subjects.
Yeah.
You know, when I first started writing about doing the numinous, like everything mystical was kind of taboo in a way. It was sort of seen as massive eye roll, super flaky and weird and woo woo. And like, I was like, no, this is really important, deep shit. We need to talk about it. Sober Curious, like super taboo to suggest that there's an alternative to like AA or 12-step recovery for people who've got alcohol abuse issues. And so I'm super drawn, and I've been questioning, like, why am I so drawn to talking about these subjects? I just put out on my podcast, my most recent episode is about cancel culture. And it's a critique of, which is very taboo to criticize cancel culture. And I'm just like, why do I keep doing this?
Yeah.
But my intuition draws me towards talking about these subjects because I'm almost like, if there's a taboo, there's dysfunction.
Yeah.
And the only way that we can like address the dysfunction that lurks underneath is to expose this and to talk about it and to actually have discourse around it. So I just feel so drawn to these taboo subjects for that reason. And I have to consistently override my fear voice, which will often say to me, you don't need to go there. Why are you going to have to be the one to like take that on? Like, no, you don't need to do that, you know, and follow my intuition, which is saying, yes. And you can hear it in my voice there, like a big sigh of relief. When I get that feeling of like is a sign that this is the way, this is the way forward.
I think a lot of other people listening will have that as well. They may or may not realize it. You know, a place where those two combine is 2 episodes ago on the podcast. I did something completely different. It was taboo and it was risky. And I felt the same way. I put out an episode of how to tell if the vaccine is right for you or not. And it literally combines with cancel culture, because I could have been deplatformed for that on Instagram and Facebook because I was saying things that were not in alignment with them. Go back and listen to the episode if you're conflicted. And it does share everything that you need for you to figure out if the vaccine's right for you. But you know, I did get censored and muted on Instagram because I was talking about it. So I'm not anti-vax. I'm not anti-anything. I am here to help you make the decision for you.
Same.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Yeah. I mean,
we should start a taboo podcast.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to be starting a podcast to talk about the themes of my new book, just as a monthly podcast, which I'm really excited about.
Will that make you three podcasts?
3. The now age is kind of like lost to the mists of time now. That's just out there in the internet. I'm sure people find it sometimes. But I mean, that was a time when I had to really, again, follow my intuition. It was the week I hit 100,000 Instagram followers with the Numinous that I was like, I'm closing down the Numinous.
Yes. Yes.
This isn't bringing me what I need. And it was that same feeling of like just a constant uphill kind of doors closing, constant anxiety.
Yep.
It's like, if constant anxiety isn't a sign that this is the wrong path, then I don't know what is. And yet we're so used to living with anxiety. We live in such an anxiety-laden world. It's really normal to be living with anxiety all day, every day.
I think it's safe to say in this public space, but it was almost like Instagram was the bad boyfriend you had to break up with.
I've been saying I'm still in the breakup. I'm still breaking. I still keep doing these posts where I'm like, I'm feeling so conflicted. I just don't think I can be here anymore. And I'm like, just leave already.
Yes.
It's so sad.
And
so I think a lot of people feel like they're in a bit of a codependent, like manipulative relationship with Instagram and social media in general, actually.
I've been talking about that a lot, especially with spiritual entrepreneurs. I'm going to be doing an interview on Monday. Someone asked me to talk about it. I think it's really important.
Yes.
Speaking of anxiety, after this, I will air the new commercial for Brillia, which has helped me with my anxiety tremendously. And I'm really grateful that they gave me an affiliate link because I think it's really amazing. So if you're interested in a product that has helped me with my lifelong obsessive anxiety, just stick around after the interview. So, Ruby, this is just, I love having you in my life in any capacity. I think you're a great source for many people with whatever you choose to put your focus on. My VA, who is like my number 2 person in my life, came from the Numinous.
Amazing.
So she found me through the Numinous.
That's great.
So, yeah. So I have to thank you for that. So anything else that you want to plug before we go?
Well, I mean, I'd say I quit the Numinous. I basically course corrected to bring it into alignment with my natural gifts and what I really enjoy doing and what I know I can earn money doing. And so it's now Numinous Books, and we've got a book every couple of months coming out this year, whilst I kind of work on my own project too. But there's just some really fascinating titles coming out. I'm getting to work with authors really in depth, one-on-one, like over a 18-month, 2-year process. And it just feels so rich and fulfilling. And the work that's coming out of it is really kind of special. So yeah, I just started a Numinous Books Facebook group if people want to join and get into kind of like deeper, more private discussions about the different subjects that are coming up there as well. And then, there's my podcast, So Be Curious, for people who are into that.
Amazing. Very, very good. Well, thank you once again for being on the show, Ruby. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Betsy. It's lovely to see you.
How to Trust Your Intuition, the podcast, is written, produced, and created by me, your host, Betsy LaFay. Music provided by Ben Talmy. If you don't want to be like that pilot that is 80% sure you'll get to your next destination safely, and you want to take the right class to learn the right language, and guess what? Intuition is a language. Head over to howtotrustyourintuition.com. I hope this podcast has been helpful to you. If it has, please forward it to a friend who you think it could also make a difference for. There's something that you can do for me and everyone else who listens to this podcast as well. If you hit subscribe, you'll never miss another episode. It'll also help the show get to other people. And of course, I know you've heard other podcast hosts say this before, but it's totally true. If you leave us a 5-star rating and a review, it helps other people like you discover this podcast. We all need to learn to trust our intuition. So, hit subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and write a little blurb while you're there. Your intuition will thank you.